the participants to the first webinar that has been organized by the CAFI-SSF, a global network for capacity building to increase access of small-scale fisheries to the financial services. A very good morning, good afternoon, an early evening, and also a late evening to one of our speakers, Ms. Lorna, who's joined us from the west coast of United States. So as we say, this is a global network, and we are glad that people from all the different time zones have enthusiastically joined us for this webinar. So just to give you all, I can see a lot of existing members of our network, and there has been an immense interest for this webinar from new participants also to join this session. So for all those new participants, I would quickly like to take you all through what this CAFI network is all about. And I will take you all through a presentation for that as to what this CAFI network is, and I'll walk you through. So as this initiative, can you see my screen, please?
Yes, you can see it.
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
yes, you can see.
Thank you. So this CAFI-SSF initiative has been, this network has been established, and the initiative to establish this network was taken during the expert workshop on guidelines for microfinance, credit, and insurance for small-scale fisheries in Asia that was organized in Bangkok, in Thailand during May 2019. This workshop was organized by FAO and co-hosted along with the APRICA, that is the Asia Pacific Rural and Credit Association. So as you'll see, why this CAFI network has been organized, the rationale behind that and the background behind that is because small-scale fisheries, which is also termed as artisanal fisheries, is broadly characterized as a dynamic and evolving subsector of the fisheries, and it employs labor-intensive harvesting, processing, and distribution to harness the fisheries' aquatic resource systems. This includes both the marine as well as the inland fishery resources. Okay, so small-scale fisheries has been a key to the environmental, economic, and social well-being of many communities, and it also achieves the triple bottom line of sustainability, that is the 3 Ps, that includes the people, profits, and planet. Worldwide, approximately about 59 million full-time and part-time workers are directly dependent on the fisheries value chain for their livelihood. And small-scale fishing communities are amongst the poorest and most afflicted with social ills, and maybe even further marginalized by failure to recognize the importance of fisheries. Inadequate supply of credit is an important constraint to enhance production in small-scale fisheries. Making credit available to rural households in general and fishers in particular is considered essential to promote economic development through microfinance, reduction of risks through insurance, and this in turn improves the access to institutional credit and insurance. While there is immense experience in providing microfinance services to the rural sector, as a lot of financial institutions do practice that, and the general scenario that we have observed in the financial sector. The particular socioeconomic and technological characteristics of the SSF, that is the small-scale fisheries, highlights the need to increase understanding of the sector's unique business characteristic, strengthen cooperation amongst stakeholders, and leverage from their experience to promote, design, and implement financial investments and solutions to meet the needs of fisher communities. The vision and the mission of the CAFI-SSF network and the aim is to facilitate the availability and access to finance and insurance through strengthening the capacity of policymakers, financial service providers, and fisherfolk organizations. The network's aim is also to further contribute to international principles and guidelines. First is to contribute to the FAO's Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. The other one is the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in context of food security and poverty eradication. The third one is the FAO guidelines for increasing access for small-scale fishers to credit and insurance services, principles for investments in sustainable wild-caught fisheries, and also the network's aim is aligned with principles of sustainable finance and the principles for responsible investment in agriculture and food. The network's So the network's aim is also further to support the integrated and sustainable economic development and contribute to the achievement of the UN 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the goal 14, 14, which is life below water, which targets under 14B, the target is to provide access for small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. The other goal that is also that we plan to work on is the goal 1, that is to end poverty in all its forms, particularly targeting 1.4 that states, ensure that all men and women, in particular, the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. The other goal is goal number 2, that is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition. Goal number 8 is also aligned, and the network aims to contribute to, which talks about promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Goal number 8 targets under that is the 8.3 that mentions promote development-oriented policies that support productive activities, decent job creation, encourage the formalization and growth of micro and small-sized enterprises, including through access to financial services. And of course, goal number 12 that ensures sustainable consumption and production patterns. Further, as you can see, the objective to form this network is to increase global attention and awareness, also to support the design and development of training materials and user-friendly financial tools that may support the sector and the communities to access financial services. The other objective is to provide advisory and services to concerned stakeholders interested in extending their services, financial services, to the small-scale fisheries sector, and to emphasize to promote partnerships and joint initiatives. Now, what is it that the member organizations or potential organizations would achieve by being a part of this CAFI-SSF network is, as you can see, the organizations, particularly financial service providers, will be able to understand the unique business characteristics of the SSF sector through this network, the value chains they operate in, and the risks that the communities and the sector faces for their livelihood. Also, the institutions can adapt their institutions to address the sectoral challenges that needs to be addressed. They can also, the member institutions can also learn from the different regional experiences and also the success and the failures that may be involved. Also, the organizations can obtain support from other network members in how to implement financial service programs in support to the SSF sector. So as you can see, our working mechanism for coordination and action is mainly at present, we are trying to generate interest, and also a couple of members are, a lot of people are also showing interest to understand what is this CAFI network all about. So the medium that we are using to connect and is the LinkedIn medium as of now. Also for where as the development material would be developed further, we would be doing the dissemination through various online platforms, primarily the Rural Finance and Investment Learning Center, which is there, which hosts a lot of training programs, online training programs, and there are a lot of training tools which can be accessed from this online platform. Also, our regional nodal partners, that is Africa and Africa, they would also be interested in future to put all these online training materials or any of the materials on their own websites. The other thing is the remote collaboration, particularly right now in these COVID times and till things become normal. So we'll try to, as we try to set up the steering committee towards the end of this year. So we, at present, then we will try to collaborate through the Zooms or the Microsoft Teams that is there, and the working groups that would be created across each of the regions, which will have meetings maybe quarterly or 6 months duration to for the working groups in their respective regions. Just to give you all an overview of the CAFI-SSF's structure. So we have over here the at the global level, we have the secretariat, which is headquartered at the FAO headquarter, and it is supported by the network coordinator who coordinates with the secretariat as well as and will coordinate with the steering committee members also. And at the regional level, we plan to have three regional levels, which is an Asia Pacific region working group, the Africa working group, and the Latin America and the Caribbean working group. And each of these working groups would have their own themes which are more relevant to that region specific particular demands or challenges that will be there, and they can work upon that. And the overall, the steering committee will be the guiding force for the working groups, as well as it will review the budgets and the plans of the working group. So as of now, the network plans to have at least a 5-year plan, and each of the working groups will at least try to have 2 years working plans for each of the working group themes that they would focus on. And as you can see, the regional working groups will be supported by the regional focal partners. So at this point, we have 2 regional nodal partners, the Africa and the Africa, that is coordinating with us. Further now, just to give you an overview of what are the support areas that the CAFI-SSF network would work on. So these are the 5 Ps which are there that are of the project cycle, that have been the identified subjects in the project cycle of finance and insurance projects and programs to which the CAFI-SSF network can contribute. So, so far the progress of the network has been that starting last year in April till July, August 2020, we held a series of network meetings across Asia Pacific, Latin America, Caribbean, Africa regions, both for East Africa as well as West Africa regions, and about more than 80 stakeholders, right from policymakers to public and private financial service providers, fisherfolk organization representatives, NGOs and academic sector representatives were involved in the network meetings, and they provided us suggestions as to what is more relevant topics that could be dealt with for each of the regions. Finally, by October 2020, we had finalized the network strategy and governance note, which we have shared with several of y'all, and all those interested, we would also in future share it with our potential members. That has been finalized. Starting this year, the CAFI network activities have been, we have started an online survey to assess the training and capacity building needs of the financial service providers as well as fisher folk organizations. A lot of institutions may have received the email for participating in the online survey so that we could understand the organization's needs as well as assess the staff's needs for building their capacities for providing services to the fisheries sector. Very soon, our survey platform is still open and till the end of this month. And later by end of May or June, we should be sharing the survey results with the participating organizations and the CAFI network member institutions also. Feel free to send your expression of interest for the member institutions. Joining the network is what, as of now, institutions can voluntarily join the network and contribute to the working plans as well as the region-wise working plans for the network. Who can be the SSF members? So as you can see, it's a broad but not limited to this. Anybody who is associated with the SSF sector and financial services for the SSF can be a network member. So broadly, we have put over here fisherfolk organizations, which also includes regional, national level organizations, cooperatives and associations, financial institutions, governments, research organizations who are at international level, regional and local research centers too can join, NGOs, and of course, intergovernmental organizations also. So once again, we invite interested member organizations to join the network. The success of the network depends on your experience, sharing, and expertise. So do send in your interest, expression of interest to the CAFI SSF ID for further joining this network. Thank you. So now, now that we would like to begin the next session for this webinar, and I would like to introduce you all to our first eminent speaker today, Dr. Raymon van Anrooy. He is a senior fishery officer. To introduce Dr. Raymon has a master's degree from Wageningen Agriculture University in Netherlands in rural development economics with specialization in aquaculture and fisheries. In 2004, he graduated from Madison University with a PhD degree in fisheries product marketing. He has been working for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations since 2000, based in Vietnam, Italy, Turkey, Barbados, Belize, and again back to Italy. Since January 2018, Dr. Raymon has been working at the FAO Fishing Operations and Technology branch. His main areas of experience are in fisheries development and investment, techno-economic assessment of fishing fleet performance, safety in fisheries, emergency assistance, and fisheries microfinance, credit, and insurance services. So Raymon, it's over to you.
Thank you very much.
Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Suchitra. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good day to all. It's very nice to see so many finance experts and friends at this first CAFI-SSF network webinar. It's a pleasure to me to make this short presentation on blue finance for small-scale fisheries. To this webinar, FAO has worked in recent years on how financial services can contribute to the blue economy development and to sustainable fisheries and aquaculture in particular. In the next about 12 to 15 minutes, I aim to cover the subjects outlined here on this slide, with an emphasis on the blue finance guidance notes that FAO has prepared recently. Let's start with a question: why do people actually fish? First of all, they fish to make money as self-employed fisher, fishing vessel owner, or as crew member. In fisheries, crew often get a share of the catch as payment, or have a basic income which is contributed to by a catch share as payment, or they have a basic income which can be contributed to by a profit share from the sale of catch. People also fish for food security, of course, and for recreation and sports. In this presentation, I will not discuss subsistence and recreational fisheries, but purely focus on the commercial fisheries side. At global level, the commercial capture fisheries industry provides employment to about 39 million people and generates about 74 million tons of seafood per year. Most fishers are active in the Asian and African regions, and fish is not just produced for domestic markets and consumption, but is also one of the most internationally traded food commodities. So far for fisheries, let's have a look at the linkages between the financial sector and the fisheries industry. Commercial fisheries is really costly to undertake. Anyone of you who has ever had a sailing yacht or a motor cruiser will know that operating costs, harbor use, and maintenance of a boat drains really your resources. I have my experiences there. A commercial fisher therefore needs money to cover the cost of operating his boat, including, of course, the fuel, the labor that he has to pay for the crew, repair costs for investing in a new vessel or an engine, for maintaining, repairing, replacing gears and equipment when things get broken. And often the fishers or fishing vessel owners will rely on credit or microfinance to cover their money needs. Credit and microfinance services assist fishers to maintain and improve the profitability of their fishing, to replace vessels or engines at the end of their life cycle, to meet fish safety and quality demands from consumer markets, comply with government regulations that promote a transition to sustainable fishing. Also, that includes, for instance, international agreements like the Cape Town Agreement on safety of fishing vessels. There is the Work in Fishing Convention number 188 from the ILO, for instance. There is the Port State Measures Agreement of the FAO. Of course, there are many fisheries management and conservation plans that provide certain gear restrictions or bycatch reduction devices. There is a few innovations are shown also below on this slide. Fishers have to adapt to the climate change situation, so they have to work on building safer vessels and using these vessels, work in a more safe way. And of course, there are pressure also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from fisheries, which is currently about 0.5% of the total greenhouse gas emission worldwide by all industries. So it's not a lot, but it is still counting. Also for surviving low demands periods, such as with the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course to recover, rehabilitate from natural disasters. So it is clear that there is a substantial need among fishers for financial services. However, not all fishers are being served adequately by financial services at present, and we are now going to discuss why. The financial service provision to small-scale fisheries is often constrained by the limited knowledge of fishing operations and small-scale fisheries business characteristics, limited knowledge of high demand for credit among fishers, low profitability of past credit programs, which is still working today against the sector, the lack of insurance mandates for fishing vessels, which can make credit suppliers very hesitant to serve the sector. There is the limited presence of service providers in coastal fishing communities, and there is often a lack of political and regulatory frameworks that encourage the provision of financial services to the small-scale fishery sector. The consequences are that many small-scale fishers rely on informal credit supply. And this creates dependency and contributes to often bad employment conditions. more debts, and poverty. Investment in more sustainable gears and fishing methods and safer vessels, as well as innovative technologies, is generally not possible with informal credit. Moreover, due to the limited access to financial services, small-scale fishers cannot participate equally as other industries in the development of the blue economy. So that brings us to the blue economy. So the blue economy can be defined, and that is by the World Bank, as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs while preserving the health of the ocean and the ecosystem. Many countries and organizations worldwide have blue economy strategies or blue growth programs or initiatives. And the common components of these strategies and initiatives are here listed, like the blue energy, so the wind energy, tidal wave energy, marine transport sector, the merchant shipping, coastal development, the development of jobs in coastal communities. Of course, tourism that is based on the sea and the oceans, such as cruise lining and yachting, diving, marine mineral resources, the seabed mining, blue biotechnology, and of course, aquaculture and fisheries. The blue economy development contributes also to many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So to give you some guidance on how various financial tools and services can contribute to the development of the blue economy and blue growth, FVO developed the Blue Finance Guidance Notes. And this series of guidance notes contains at the moment 6 policy briefs in the form of brochures. And I will discuss here in this short presentation 5 of them. Which are, of course, those who are relevant only for small-scale fisheries. The first one is on microfinance for small-scale fisheries, which deals with many of the same items as that will be presented by Dr. Lorna Grace when she discusses the guidelines in a moment. It describes the benefits of microfinance for fishers and fishing communities, and it provides advice on how governments and other stakeholders can contribute and support to the establishment and operation of microfinance schemes for small-scale fishers. The second Blue Finance Guidance Note is on insurance for small-scale fishers. It contains challenges in the provision of insurance services to small-scale fishers. It also discusses the opportunities for developing fishing vessel and third-party liability insurance schemes in fisheries. Insurance is considered a key to making the sector economically healthy and sustainable. Currently, this guidance note and the one on microfinance are being translated into French for dissemination of information in the African region in the coming months. A third Blue Finance Guidance Note is on blue bonds. Bonds are debt-based financial instruments which are used to raise capital for many purposes. They can be issued by a range of entities. It can be governments, can be private sector entities, multilateral banks or commercial banks. And bond investors, they are paid a fixed interest rate, which is called a coupon, on a fixed schedule. The initial investment, the principal and interest must be paid in full at maturity. And this brochure on blue bonds gives examples on how these blue bonds can contribute to the improvement of fisheries management and the conservation of fisheries resources. Blue bonds can, for instance, be used to invest in climate change resilient fishing port infrastructure, of which small-scale fishers can benefit. They can also be used for improving marine enforcement and surveillance capacity to reduce illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing by foreign fleets. So far for blue bonds. Let's go to another tool. This is the blended finance. Blended finance is the use of public or philanthropic money to catalyze the deployment of private capital to achieve a positive impact. The blended finance as a tool is often started with an initial public sector investment to pilot innovative projects to show their viability, and then use these pilot projects to attract private finance. Small amounts of public finance can then open the door for much larger amounts of private finance, thus leveraging public money to the maximum effect. The Malloy Fund that is mentioned here is an example of a blended finance tool which supports the sustainable development of fisheries in Indonesia and Philippines, and is managed by the NGO RARE. There's a quite interesting concept also, this blended finance, and I think it is interesting also for APRACA and Africa and their members. Let's go to the final Blue Finance guidance note that I would like to discuss here or show to you, is the one on impact investment. Impact investors generally, they aim at the triple bottom line of achieving social, economic, and environmental benefits. Suchitra also mentioned about that earlier. And there are several impact investment funds active in the fisheries sector, such as the Altilia Sustainable Ocean Fund. And there is this company of the enterprise Encourage Capital. And these impact investors are generally sensitive to the needs of small-scale fishers, supporting the reallocation of quota, especially to small-scale producers, and rebuilding overexploited and depleted stocks. So with their money, they try to do good and contribute to this triple bottom line. It's also pretty in widely used concept in other sectors, and is really worth to consider also in support of small-scale fisheries in many places. So I kept this really short, and I hope that this short summary information on Blue Finance tools has given you some ideas and maybe made you interested in reading further about this. You can find the series of Blue Finance guidance notes with more detailed information online. We will also share with you an email with the web links to all 6 brochures that are already prepared. So in case you want to read these, then you have direct access to them. FVO plans to produce a few more in the coming months or years. And so once in a while, please visit our website. We will also distribute them, of course, through the CAFI-SSF network. And if you would like to work with us together on more of this guidance notes, please contact us. You can also contact Suchitra or me or anybody of the team. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or ask them at the end of the webinar. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and back over to you, Suchitra. Thank you all. Cannot hear you, Suchitra.
Suchitra, you are muted.
Sorry. Many thanks, Dr. Raymon, for covering the broader context of blue economy and the information on blue finance. Beginning with the common components of blue economy and the efforts made by FAO to increase financial investments in the sector by preparation of these guidance notes for microfinance and insurance for small-scale fisheries, blue bonds, blended finance, and impact investments for enhancing growth. The published Blue Finance Guidance Note series, as Raymon, as you have said, has case studies. I'm sure that will be useful to provide the governments, private and public sector stakeholders with information, resources, and concrete pathways for obtaining finance to support the blue growth transitions at local, national, regional, and global scales. And that will act as catalyst, perhaps, to improve the ocean systems. Thank you once again, Dr. Raymon.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So now we will move on to our next eminent speaker, Miss Lorna Grace, who is going to speak on the guidelines for microfinance and credit to support the small-scale fisheries. Introducing Lorna, So she is a senior finance specialist with more than 25 years of experience in the international and domestic finance. She has an AB from Harvard University in government and an MBA from the University of Alberta in finance. She's a chartered financial analyst and she has expertise in agriculture and fisheries finance, covering all aspects of project management. As a project director in Honduras, she transformed the challenging Millennium Challenge Account Honduras Access to Credit Activities project into an innovative trend-setting model for agriculture finance based on input supplier and trade credit, catalyzing numerous value chain finance arrangements between financial institutions and SME partners in the supply chain. Ms. Grace also has developed 2 tools for agribusiness financial planning, including the Farm Planner tool, which measures and analyzes cash flows for short and long-term farm investments. She's also the author of CGAP's costing tool and is a contributor to several publications. Lorna has recently co-authored the guidelines for microfinance and credit services in support of small-scale fisheries in Asia for the FAO and the Africa. So over to you, Lorna.
Thank you, Suchitra. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I am lucky to have been involved with FAO and APRACA when we developed these guidelines. So it's been quite interesting to use some of my experience in agriculture finance and microfinance to a certain degree to sort of apply some of those learnings and see and learn a lot about fisheries and small scale fisheries. So the guidelines themselves are they have 4 purposes. One is to just basically increase awareness of the financial service needs of SSF, to guide policy decision makers to help introduce and incentivize financial services, build capacity among financial service providers, organizations, fisherfolk organizations, NGOs, and promote financial services that incentivize and reward a responsible and sustainable conduct of fishing, fish processing, and marketing operations. Next, please. Thank you. So why is actually finance for small scale fisheries so important? To be honest, a lot of this was kind of surprising to me when I started working in this, and just in general, the sheer extent of people who are involved in fisheries, I think and small scale fisheries is stunning. And they need a range of financial services. So we get again to this thing where we have a lot of time we focus on credit, we focus on, we do focus a bit on insurance, but they also need other types of products such as savings, payments, like payment services, remittances, cash flow, cash flow management tools, and those kinds of things. Next, click, please. So in terms of credit, so we're focusing more on, obviously on this one is on credit. We use the terms microfinance and credit credit sort of indicates more of a higher level of, or a larger sum of loan. So the SSF businesses need access to working capital and fixed asset finance. Capture fisheries are under pressure from unsustainable fishing practices, and providing credit can contribute to investments for sustainable fisheries management. So you do run into quite a few of these vessels that are needing to invest in upgrading so that they can continue to participate in fisheries. And a lot of these things are, directed by the government, or they have regulations. And so they do need to put some investment into upgrading their boats. Next. And the other thing that we ran into quite a bit was the provision of credit by financial institutions can replace the hold of some of the predatory marketing arrangements that SSF may have with their value chain actors, so the ones that they sell to. And this can contribute to high, if you can sort of remove or replace this predatory arrangements, you can contribute to higher SSF margins. So why is microfinance and credit not targeting SSFs in general? In part, I don't want to go too much into this because I know Raymond covered this, but a recognition of whether or not the business itself is profitable. Not every SSF business is profitable. Some is subsistence, but many of these activities are profitable in general. The low technical and financial capacity of the SSFs and the social inclusion also deters investment. The other issue is, are you able to operate these types of loans or credit and deliver these services with, by having a profit, or at least covering most of your costs, if not all. The political and regulatory frameworks can be a deterrent, and we can talk a little more about that later. And there's a general weak understanding of a nuanced sort of the risks that are that pertain to the SSFs and what a financial institution can manage and influence, what the SSFs can manage and influence, and what elements and what risks need to be basically transferred to a third party, usually insurance providers. And one thing that we see a lot of, or a lack of, is there's within the financial institutions themselves, there's usually a lack of a core knowledge of what this business is, what the value chains are, and so that's having a unit that, or a person that knows enough about the value chains that can be quite complex, and the industry overall would be useful. So generally speaking, we find that the institutions that are involved in financing SSFs, either with credit or microfinance, either have an institutional mandate whereby they're already involved in agriculture finance. So it's a fairly natural transition to move into or to grow through adding capture fisheries. Or they may have an environmental mandate that they need to work with sustainable businesses. They could have a product mandate where they're specifically looking at, say, fixed asset provision. If they're a leasing firm, or let's say if they are, a lot of banks or financial institutions don't do huge amounts of fixed asset loans. So but if an institution has a product mandate already, they may find a natural segue towards the small scale fishers. They might be able to see a market in replacing internal value chain finance, or even leveraging internal value chain finance. And there were one or two of the programs that we looked at that was one of the types of products that they had, was essentially a bridge financing to pay off let's say the intermediaries or the middlemen that had been lending them sort of with predatory interest rates. So or they may identify smaller programs and investments and collaborate or co-finance with those. And then sometimes there's second tier incentives as well to entice financial institutions. In Papua New Guinea, for example, we found that the Department of Fisheries set up a fund, a guarantee fund, and a microfinance bank decided to avail of the guarantee fund. It was specific for fisheries, and so they got involved in the fisheries market, sort of being supported by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries there. Next. So you'll notice through my presentation, I often compare a little bit to agriculture because there are a lot of similarities in between agriculture and capture fishery. And And there's a lot of differences as well. There are key business drivers in agriculture, such as yields, the government policies, capture fishery has some of the similar things. Some of the key business drivers and the key profit drivers are their yields. They may be subject to quotas, the capture fisheries, and they may be, in agriculture, you may get price caps. There's a lot of different elements that are somewhat the same. Risks, similar risks. Climate change is a risk in agriculture and in capture fishery. Weather, obviously. Prices, market prices. So these are some of the risks. The capture fisheries may have additional risks, seasonal ebbs and flows, declining stocks. There's equipment failure, a number of different things, extra risks there. For agriculture, when you actually deliver finance or credit, it's very important to look at the cash flows of the activity, and that is the same and almost let's say highlighted even more so with capture fishery, where the cash flows can be even more erratic than agriculture, and so it's very important to be able sort of forecast the cash flows. The funding characteristics, they need the same type of funding, short-term for inputs, long-term for equipment purchase. That's the thing. Organizations are often very similar in terms of the groups and organizations of the fishers. So they're within associations, cooperatives, SHGs, these kinds of things. And the value chain. So how the value chains are constructed very much depends on the type of activity they're in, the type of crop in the case of agriculture, the type of fish product in the case of capture fishery. So sometimes you have very structured value chains in either type of industry, and sometimes you have much looser, more market-oriented types of value chains, much more sort of price dependent, market price dependent. So these are all the nuances of each of the value chains are really important when lending to these entities. Okay, next. All right. So there's a number of actors that are involved in SSF finance. On the demand side, there's obviously the individuals, and then they're also often grouped. Many times in groups. It really depends on the value chain itself and the country. On the supply side, there are government financial institutions, microfinance institutions, rural banks and credit organizations, wholesale financiers, IFIs, international financial. So there's a whole gamut of suppliers for finance, and they provide both retail, or some provide retail finance and some provide sort of a wholesale finance or second tier finance. So you do find a predominant on the retail side. You do see more rural banks, government financial institutions, and rural credit organizations. You see fewer private sector microfinance institutions. You might see some NGOs and those kinds of things. So it's a good mix, but it's these different suppliers have different motivations and different objectives. On the multifunction actors are the ones that behave with two functions, at least a minimum of two functions. So, for example, a value chain actor has the function of potentially being a supplier or a purchaser of SSF products. They also might be financiers, and we see that actually quite a bit. We see this internal value chain finance, and some are very sort of very cost effective, and some are not. Some are more predatory, as we speak more of. We also see development NGOs or these technical service providers or where they may be providing credit as well as some sort of technical service or business service or those kinds of things. And then finally, the enabling environment, which is usually quite critical in these these types of activities. You'll see mainly departments, Department of Fisheries will be involved, local regional government, and the central bank will be the ones that will be will be regulating the supply side. So, dictating priority lending sectors or interest rate spreads or whatever. So those are very important players in this financial market. Next. So going down more to the operating side of delivering finance and financial products and services to the SSF, we found that in general, some of the good practices of delivering financial products is sort of a really holistic, we say holistic understanding or an in-depth understanding of the client and the market, which is essentially the client and the value chain that they operate in. So it's very important to have a good idea of what's going on and who the players are and how the players are interacting. We need to know what the activities are that are being financed, what we need to know who's being, what are the main drivers and the dynamics within the businesses, and to who people are selling and who their suppliers are. Normally we want flexible product design, and this is something that's very important. If you have a credit or a loan that is requiring quarterly cash pay or quarterly installments, and you are financing a vessel, maybe a fixed asset on the vessel, and the vessel doesn't even come into the dock more than once every 6 months, or if he or she if you're expecting a weekly repayment and they a lot of times vessels will go out and they won't be able to get very much product to be able to sell. So there has to be sort of a flexible product design based on some of the dynamics of the kind of fisheries that the fish and the seafood that they're actually trying to capture. So that sort of drives sort of a cash flow analysis before you deliver the finance, so that you can sort of adjust the installments around the expected cash flows and to accommodate those. Normally what we see is within these institutions, they will distinguish the SSF finance or the SSF operations or the policies within the overall policies and process. So there will be sort of a call out that says, okay, this is our product for SSF finance. This is our product. This is our process of delivering this product. And this is our process of, these are our risk. This is our risk checklist. This is what we're going to be looking at. So you usually have a fairly distinct, you just don't consider this SSF activity, for example, just another business for example, a little shop business in the urban center. You have to distinguish it. The use, and we go into this a little bit later, using alternative delivery and repayment channels. So use of, for example, digital finance is something that we spoke a lot about, that being able to repay or disperse through the phone or through your MNO or through the internet or whatever is one way that we see, one thing that we do see. Another is using let's say value chain actors, for example, processors that always purchase the fish from the same SSFs every year, day in, day out. using them to potentially screen for the credit, potentially disperse the credit, potentially take a third-party repayment on behalf of the SSFs that are being financed. So there's so many different ways of mixing things up beyond just the traditional come to the MFI, come to the bank, and I will give you some cash, and then you come back and repay me every week or every month. So there's a lot of different things that can be mixed up and done, and this will all help mitigate some of the risks. There's typically within these institutions, there's an appreciation of the unique and systemic risks that you do find with this type of activity. So we realize, and this is in some ways similar to agriculture, we realize it's risky, but we do not, we have a nuanced approach to measuring these risks and to mitigating these risks. And I think that that's a really important thing, because when you talk to financial institutions, banks, MFIs, they surprisingly don't ever really say, oh, it's too costly to go after this type of business. They usually say the biggest most significant factor why we don't do this is because we think it's risky. And when you try to ask them more about, okay, what do you mean by it's risky? Well, they can't, they haven't been able to quantify the risk. They haven't been able to approach risks that they can manage, risks that they can't manage, and ways of having the SSF manage those risks. So I think it's an important element in serving this market. And we often see when we're delivering this, when you have a differentiated policies and procedures, differentiated products, and essentially a type of business cycle that is different from what some of your staff might be used, your loan officers might be used to dealing with, you need to have a different type of incentive system, a different type of marketing to reflect these sort of different activities, different patterns, different dynamics. Next. All right, I'm not going to go through all of these, but what we also found was that there was a lot of needs. As we mentioned before, the needs are fairly diverse, and they aren't just they sort of all the needs. There's microfinance needs, credit needs throughout all the value chain. So from the capture fishery, well, actually it's from the input providers first through the capture fisheries, the fishers themselves, fish processing, fish packaging, and fish retail. And so we have to take this as sort of a sort of a distinct approach to each one of these things. And you will find that, for example, fish retail, while the activity or the investment needs might be, purchasing an ice machine or a freezer, and those are kind of the fixed asset needs are different. In a sense, they're probably not so different from any other kind of retail that you would find, food retail, let's put it that way. So you have to, this SSF finance is not just about the capture fisheries, which are quite unique, but the processing, the packaging, and the retail are actually quite similar to, say, corresponding other businesses that like tomato processing, for example, or tomato canning, or these kinds of things. So, but it's there is a significant amount of need. And I think, as Raymon said, is one of the big needs are on the capture fishery side is the biggest sort of capital need in terms of value or volume is for equipment or adapting boat vessels for sustainable fishing. Next. All right. These are some of the elements that you may find as you go through, and you may know. There are some unique elements that are related to the SSF activities and economy. And one of these is that for some SSFs, many, in fact, this is more, SSF is more of a livelihood finance. So it's more of it's one part of a diverse income stream that you have. And as we see this a lot with smallholder farmers as well, that when you finance the productive household unit, as opposed to just the one activity, you will get a better performance overall and probably meet meet the needs a little bit better of that household unit. Adaptation finance we spoke about is implementation of standards recommended or demanded by the government, and that's usually for capital investments. Off-season activities. This is one that's a very difficult and a challenging problem or opportunity, I guess, is to be able to meet the financing needs, and it might be consumer finance in some cases, for SSFs that are because some fishing is seasonal. There's low fishing and high fishing season, so they may need some sort of financing to take them through those kind of lean months. It may be because they want to invest in another type of activity, or it may just be because they need a little bit of cash just to get through those times that they aren't working. So it's providing revenue. You see this a lot with agriculture as well. Linked finance. One of the things we talked a lot about is linking credit with the insurance product, and we feel that this is quite a promising area. There's a opportunity to cross-sell, and that's always appealing to the financial institution. And it also, insurance sort of provides a post facto kind of guarantee of the loan repayment, depending on the risk. So this is something we see. And then, as I mentioned before, these predatory loans that happen, the pre-financing, the predatory, where the effective interest rates can be, up to 100% effectively annually. So these are the kinds of things that, to me anyway, represent an opportunity for the financial institutions to come in and replace. Next. Okay, so again, just briefly, when we look at product design, financial product design for a small scale fisher, again, you have to decide on what the activity is that you're financing and the type of financial need. And the idea is to develop a product around the cash flows of the activity. Establishing the correct term. I mean, there's no sense asking, giving a 6-month loan to somebody who needs to completely replace and rebuild the hull of his vessel, for example. So you have to establish the correct term. You may, as mentioned before, discuss using somehow the value chain, either to deliver the loan, screen the loan, potentially partially guarantee the loan. It really depends on the relationship within the value chain between the SSF and different actors in the value chain. So it certainly bears investigation. There is, of course, gender elements. We do see more women in certain types of levels of the value chain for the capture fisheries. So they're more in the trading areas, maybe in the processing as well. And integrating again or cross-selling with other financial needs and serving the household, serving the package with your sort of panoply of financial services. Next. Okay, so when we see the policies and procedures, as mentioned, we usually have a specific call out within the policy procedures that deals specifically with SSF. But normally we didn't see too many completely separate. They would be embedded in ag policies and procedures. You would have a specific credit applications because you are going to be looking at sort of financials and doing cash flows for the specific to the fisheries. And you would have a checklist, like a risk-based checklist, where you would go through the risks that usually pertain specifically to SSF capture fisheries. And then you would normally have specific risk management and mitigation policies around this type of financial product. Okay, and I already spoke of this, the different delivery channels. We can use these to reduce the cost and lower the risk. Go ahead. Oh, I should mention, can you just go back? I should mention, I didn't talk too much about the group. In many sort of credit institutions or NGOs may deliver finance through the group itself, through a group of fishers. So it could be an SHF, a BSLA, or something like this, an association. And sometimes you will see the group will also do some of the vetting, some of the screening, but they also actually may manage the loan themselves, essentially acting as a retailer, and the financial institution acts as the wholesaler. Next. Yeah, this is sort of just a way of kind of looking at the risks that you might find with the SSF, in particular, the capture fisheries themselves. And the way it's sort of structured is that you have risks around the business itself. You know, how is it being managed? Does it have markets? Is it diversified? And these kinds of things. Those are things that you, as a financial institution, should be informed about, and you should know this, and it's specific to the business itself. And then there are these market risks, that regulations, the market prices, the costs of inputs that are important, but it's very difficult for you. It's impossible for you as a financial institution to influence, but you can actually monitor these. So you can be aware that these things might happen. You can monitor the prices in the markets, and then but you can't influence them. And then finally, you have these bigger environmental risks that you can't influence, and you normally have no way of knowing whether these things are going to hit you or hit the activity or the SSF. And these types of environmental risks are normally managed by third parties in terms of insurers. Next.
Sorry to interrupt, Lorna. Lorna, you have another 2 minutes.
Okay, no, that's fine. Are we going to do these questions later then? Or do you want to do these now?
Okay, so yes, it's better we do the questions now.
Okay, but I have 2 minutes for them.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So the question, I sort of figured out some of these questions about from trying to get some participation about how we can stimulate more interest in this market. What is your opinion? There's 50 of you. What is your opinion about what's holding people back from financing these kinds of markets? You really don't, when you do go to see financial institutions, along the coast or big cities in Africa, big cities in Asia, the fishery portfolio is either subsumed in the agriculture portfolio, so you don't really know, or it's just not a focus in general, or they don't really serve, or they don't know necessarily if they're serving SSF. So I'd be interested in getting some feedback on that, if anybody has some thoughts.
Okay.
If not, that's okay. We can do it at the end. Anyone? And this is some other questions about the value chains and how can we use some of the commercial value chains to deliver, support the credit or the loans, and potentially the role of digital finance and digital technology, not just finance, digital technology. Or maybe we could just think about that and return to them later. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you, Lorna. You have certainly left us with a lot of deeper questions. Thank you so much for walking us through an in-depth and nuanced guideline for credit and microfinance services for SSF. It was interesting to note the entry and leverage points that would be useful to to take decisions for the stakeholders for provision of the SSF services. The comparative approach for agri and versus the capture fisheries for key business drivers, the risk in financings, funding characteristics, and the value chain characteristics, and the unique elements related to SSF activities and economy. So it was really interesting to listen to this and understand this better. So thank you once again, Lorna. If there are any questions related with Lorna's presentation, the session is open for the participants to ask any questions before we move on to our next two speakers. Okay. Yes, Mr. Vivekanand.
Thank you. It was a useful overview and a very elaborate explanation and outline of the whole microfinance sector in fisheries, especially small-scale fisheries. A few thoughts or comments which can also be construed as questions. I think, of course, some of the things vary according to context, which is country specific, but some of the problems we face in India are not that much reflected in this framework analysis, I thought. For instance, probably many of the developed countries, the problem is the supply side itself. There's just not enough players or actors or enough funds available to provide microfinance to the small fishermen. Or there is an absence of recognition itself of that sector and so on. India is one of the countries where we have a very well set up banking system and financial institutions are plenty. And there have been different attempts over the years to reach to the people who are finding it difficult to access the regular banking system. So there's a huge system out there. But the problems that we face are a combination of certain things. For instance, managing the delinquency in the small-scale fisheries and fisheries in general is one of the difficult areas, and that gives a bad name to the sector. And in terms, even if there is a flow for a time, delinquency tends to spoil it. It spoils not just for the group which went delinquent, but the rest of the sector also. So this is one kind of a problem we have. And then we have the problem of competition between channels, well-intentioned channels. Forget about these extortionists or private money lenders and all that. Well-intentioned channels which tend to spoil the market for everybody else. Government cooperatives, fisheries cooperatives in India have such a poor track record. They barely or probably do not meet the definition of a fisheries cooperative, but they are all out there and generously lending at a particular point in time. Then everything collapses and then there's no funds. And there are governments, state governments, which quite happily underwrite loans which could have very well be recovered. And then independent organizations which have been a good track record of regular credit flow and proper repayment have a kind of, it affects their performance and delinquency starts. Then you have this whole grant-based, subsidy-based system, which tends to once again spoil the loan market because institutional finance is seen by many fishermen as just another name, institutional credit as another name for a subsidy. So there are all kinds of factors which affect. Then, of course, there is this whole problem of poor fisheries management. Small-scale fishers are being marginalized systematically, and they have been systematically losing out in their share of the catches over the last 30, 40 years. Some of us have been working. That their ability to to succeed in their business and be able to repay loans are badly affected. So fundamental policy changes are required. Some kind of streamlining of all these competitive and well-intentioned, but systems which tend to spoil the market for microcredit is something also to be highlighted. And these are the things that we struggle in India very much. And maybe another point also to look at, which in our context is probably unique, because I have seen in many developed countries, even the traditional channels are non-existent in many places. Here we have a very vibrant informal money market, which is also quite competitive and can give microfinance a run for the money. Of course, some may say, if they are doing well, so why should we be there? But it's a little more complicated than that. So the issue of high interest rates and the informal money markets, ways of getting money back is something that the formal sector can never copy. So there are many such issues that I would like to highlight about microfinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So if there are no questions, we can move to the next session. But before that, we would like to request participants if they can switch on their cameras, because we would like to take a photograph for this webinar. So it's a kind request.
Excuse me, I actually want to ask something. Can I?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Annie from Bank Indonesia. Good afternoon from Indonesia right now. Thank you very much for all those presentations. It's really appreciate about that. And I want to a little ask for Lorna that you said that central bank can make a regulation to improve or help this Ssfs fisheries, small scale fisheries like this. And maybe you can give us an example or a little best practice that we can learn to improve this from supply side. Thank you very much.
You mentioned that you're a central bank. Is it central bank you're talking about, or a bank?
Central bank.
Yeah, a central bank, yeah. So one of the issues we find, well, central bank or the regulatory bodies often have an issue is that one of the things we see is that there's no secure transaction law, which means that there's no collateral registry, which means that lending for fixed assets is difficult because they have to use real property or housing or real estate. So being able to say secure a loan against the actual machinery that or the equipment that you're financing using a secured transactions law with a collateral registry would be useful, I think. The other thing, and it's hard because I don't know exactly what Indonesia's policy is for the central bank, but some banks, for example, or some central banks or regulators say, okay, you have to submit, every bank that does any kind of finance has to submit sort of a payment plan for each loan, sort of a structure. And they say it has to be quarterly or it has to be monthly. And with that, when you have that, what happens is a bank can still make a loan and expect different installments, for example, smaller installments sometimes, bigger installments other times, or something that's more seasonal, okay, every 5 months or something along those lines. They can still get that, but they will get penalized in terms of having to make more provisions because the central bank will say, okay, or the regulator will say, okay, look, that's it doesn't follow the rules, and so you have to make some provisions on that because it's essentially late or delinquent. So there are things that the central bank can do. It really depends on what's already in place that you have right now. The other thing we see is, I'm not sure if it's necessarily a central bank, but I do know that central banks monitor this. is that one thing we noticed was that, you know, I'm pretty sure Indonesia has it, the Philippines has it, India has it. They have priority lending sectors. And they say, okay, you need to put 10, I think Indonesia has like 10% or 12%, I can't remember. And they say you need to put 10 or 12% into the your agriculture portfolio. And it's called, you need to put 10% into your ag, your fisheries, your forestry. But they don't say, so people just put it into their ag. They don't necessarily specifically call out fisheries or call out forestry. So they don't say 2% in fisheries. You know, fisheries is 2% of our GDP. You should be putting 2% of your money into that. So that's another area that to be a little bit more specific, and then having the financial institutions report against that. Normally, they just report, here's my ag portfolio or ag business, or it depends on how they do that. So those are some ways I think that a central bank could be a little bit more proactive. I don't know, Raymond, do you have other ideas?
Not at the moment. Yeah, the issue of repayment, of course, the repayment schedule for small-scale fisheries, that is always an issue in loans. If it is too strict, then it's just not working, because yeah, the repayment capacity depends on the catches, and that has a big impact on the performance, of course, of the credit, also the profitability of the fisheries. So I think I'll leave it to that. But yeah, I agree with what you said, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to add to what Lorna and Raymond said, you know, in the central banks of this region, most of the central banks, they have a system of granularized, or you can say sectoral or sectoral demarcation on the finance in the priority sector lending, as Lorna was telling. Yes, agriculture takes the majority of it, but we do have in all the central banks, they have a system of getting the information regarding the fish finance to the fisheries by the banking institutions in the countries. So there is the system available. I mean, the central banks are sending getting reports on that, on the fisheries finance. But when they compile the report, it doesn't come to the public that what is exactly the amount of the fisheries finance, which actually needs some kind of policy engagement with the central banks. And we from Upare, we are doing it. Recently, we sent some letters to the central bank, including Bank Indonesia, that we need to understand the amount of finance to the fisheries. And I mean, if we can further granularize that finance to the fisheries to the SSF level. I mean, they have finance, but most of them goes to the big like ports, and so that doesn't come under the priority sector. That also come under the priority sector for them. So there is a gap which I think we need some more engagement with the central banks to get actually the actual figure and come out with a kind of policy paper or something to let the financial institution of the financial services to know what is actually happening in this particular sector. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on. Thank you so much for all the inputs to Dr. Prasun and other Dr. Vivekanand, and also from Central Bank, also from Bank of Indonesia. So now we'll take the photograph. So Dugyu, please switch on your cameras.
Smile also.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dugyu. So we'll move on to our next eminent speaker. That is Dr. Prasun Kumar Das. He will be talking about Africa FAO CAFI-SSF partnership for enhancing SSF network in Asia Pacific region. So Dr. Prasun is currently leading, as I've said, the Africa Association, and he's the Secretary General based out of Bangkok. Prior to this assignment, Dr. Prasun was a project manager of IFAD Regional Grant Project. He was also a rural finance specialist in FAO. Before that, he was Associate Professor Agribusiness and a Research Director in DFID Regional Grant Project. Dr. Prasun has also held senior positions in public sector commercial banks and has been a consultant advisor expert on rural and agriculture development to the Government of India. Dr. Prasun has served as member of International Project Design Team for IFAD, FAO, and World Bank, and has also led number of multi-country donor-funded short-term studies and projects. He has also served as the panelist speaker in several international events and was the organizing secretary of the 6th World Conference on Agriculture Finance. Dr. Prasun holds a doctoral degree in agronomy and an MBA with specialization in financial management, and he's a certified professional in banking and finance. So over to you, Dr. Prasun.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I think it's a privilege for me to know to address this a big gathering. I think we are 52, 53 members present, and we really happy to have all of you here. And this is because it's a network, and I'm working in a network for last 8 years. So I understand the importance of people being participating in the network meetings and in this kind of webinars. I personally would like to thank Suchitra and Ms. Makta for organizing and their efforts to make this a series, to start the series of webinars, which will be definitely will have a impact, long-term impact on all our stakeholders. I trust you already have some idea about the genesis, terms of references, and expected outputs of this global network, CAFI-SSF. I think the presentation of Dr. Raymon was, as usual, excellent and extremely interesting. About the blue finance. I'm more interested in not in the other parts, but definitely on the business models and the instruments. What he talked about, the blended finance, the green bonds, the blue bonds, which are really very, very interesting to understand how the instruments, the financial instruments, can change the delivery system and the overall portfolio. I think we need to concentrate more on these business models and the instruments. The guidelines we already, as Lorna was presenting the guidelines, which actually was brilliant, and I'm sure that all of you already got to know about the challenges which she actually flagged in her presentation, and also the best practices. So I'm glad that one of our colleagues from India presented that what are the specific issues of India, but to be reminded that this particular guideline was for the whole Asia Pacific region. So we need to be a little bit generalized. But definitely we will be interested to know more about the country-specific or contextual issues which we can discuss or deal later on, and I request Suchitra and Maktab to take a note on this so that we can organize some kind of a webinar for a country-specific issues being raised by our colleagues. So I'm not going into the details, rather I'll keep my presentation short. It's not a presentation rather, and let you know the CAFI-SSF and APRACA, the connections. No, as Suchitra was telling that we organized for the first time this experts meeting in Bangkok, where we FAO and FAO was kind enough to provide some grants to us to organize this program, and we are happy that Lorna and Dr. Ube, they agreed to write this guideline books, which was edited by Raymon quite aptly, and then we have this guideline. And then on that particular experts meeting, those I can see some of you, I can see some of you present on that meeting also. So in that meeting itself, we discussed about what will be the shape and structure of this network, the global network. And I must congratulate Raymon for keeping this very focused, and Suchitra also to take this pain to reach out to all of us. And definitely it is really a very important happening, because as I said earlier that I mean, most of the banks or the financial institutions, they don't care about what actually the sector, what is the I mean, their contribution we know, but how much the financial services are contributing to them has to be really defined and has to be documented. So that is where this came, and the idea of establishing this CAFI network came. And then FAO published 2 guidelines, which APRACA also supported them for this publication, and we disseminated this widely among our member institutions and countries. And APRACA executive committee members took a resolution in 2019 in our 71st executive committee meeting that we need to enhance this particular subsector of agriculture finance. So this is then FAO approved some 2 small grants for working in Philippines, and now we have started working in Thailand. So that we are also grateful to Raymon for organizing this, these grants. So, and we are expecting the outputs from the Philippines within another 3 months' time, and we will get back to all of you for the outputs, and so that you can contextualize it according to your country, and use those outputs for enhancing the finance to this subsector of agriculture. And then APRACA also organized some webinar already, where Raymon was one of our speakers, and it was a great response from our member, even the non-members, the IT service providers, that they want to take this up as a part of their integrated system, so that when the banks or the financial institutions, they want to have a lending procedure, they can utilize the IT in their system, so which is very, very essential for this purpose. Then, as we already said, we are committed, APRACA as well as its member institution. We are committed to support this initiative and this network, and we are confident the results of the projects which are being implemented in the Philippines and Thailand will provide some kind of a knowledge to this to this body of knowledge, and also can be implemented or scaled up in other countries. I think I stop here. If you have any question for us, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prasun, for floating that idea to organize country-wise webinars to discuss and facilitate for enhancing the finance to SSF. We also have been thinking on these lines. It could be either country-wise or bringing 2-3 countries together to discuss these issues. So somewhere the partnerships and the synchronization of thoughts is very much building up already in this partnership. And there's certainly a lot of learning for also the SSF CAFI network to learn from how the networks can be developed and built from Africa. As you said, you've been heading this for past 8 years. So there's certainly a lot of learning, and we'll keep interacting. And thank you very much for Africa's support and your team's support to build this network in the Asia Pacific region. So we'll move on to our eminent speaker from Africa, the Africa Rural Credit Association. So that's introducing Mr. Thomas Essel, the Secretary General of Africa. Mr. Thomas Africa has been headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. And Mr. Thomas has many years of experience in economic and development issues. At Africa, he has provided leadership and collaboration programs with governments in Africa and a number of development partners. Prior to joining Africa, he worked in Bank of Ghana for over 20 years, holding different positions. His last position at the bank was Head of External Financial Relations and Head of Bank of Ghana initiated Ghana incentive-based risk-sharing system for agriculture lending. That's the GIRSAL, providing strategic and technical guidance to management. Mr. Essel has considerable experience in policy, having worked both in Bank of Ghana and also in policy coordination, monitoring and evaluation unit of the Office of the President of the Republic of Ghana for 2 years. Mr. Essel holds a bachelor's degree in social science and a master's degree in development studies from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. He has undertaken several courses and programs in economics and agriculture related areas. He has also jointly worked with Dr. E.K. Ikuma on a number of IFLIP research papers on access to credit under Ghana's financial sector liberalization. So over to you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Suchitra, for the great work that you are doing. May I take this opportunity first to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you wherever you are. In Nairobi here, you woke us up very early.
Sorry about that.
So it's been good joining this program, and I want to thank the FAO for bringing out this webinar, which is giving us the opportunity to share and to hear what our other brothers in other regions are doing, like what Dr. Prasun just said. So thank you for organizing this program. We hope that it will be useful to all of us, and we will come again another time. In Africa, how many minutes do I have?
5 to 7
5.
minutes.
Okay.
Is that enough?
That's all right. We will realize that in Africa, we have, if you look at the least development countries in the world, currently the list totals 46. Out of this 46, 33 of them are in Africa. And majority of these are also in sub-Saharan Africa, where we mostly operate. We see that there are some diverse diversity among these countries, which are even most of them least developed countries. We have a very long coastline from northwest of Africa through West Africa, through East Africa, South Africa, back to Madagascar and the Horn of Africa. And all these have populations that are engaged in fisheries. If you come to our inland area too, we have inland rivers, lakes, aquaculture, all dealing in fisheries. And the numerous people living near these great lakes like Victoria, Tanganyika, and Malawi, and the rivers Nile, Niger, and Congo depend primarily on fish for their nutrition intake. So we see that there are great opportunities for economic progress if we are to raise this sector. Now coming back to the topic, developing guidelines for microfinance and credit services in support of small scale. We asked the question, what should guide the development of the guidelines? And I'm glad that Lorna and Raymon have given copious ideas and reasons why it is important that we have such guidelines, because they are things that can promote the small scale fisheries sector. So the question that I ask is, all these fine surveys that we have done, will they be implementable? If they are, then they must directly address the issues that our fisher folks and our financial institutions that service them work. It must address their issues. And so we should, in trying to get the guidelines, we have to look at both the demand and the supply sides, as have been already said. If I want to put it in context, some of the things that will have to be, initial things that will have to be looked at will include what is the policy environment in which we want to have these guidelines. What is the socioeconomic life of the people that we want to help? What is their literacy levels in terms of education? In my country, those who live along the coast who are in the fisheries have very little education. So all this must be factored in when we want to get the guidelines. And what is the level of even financial literacy in the country among the various sectors? And then perhaps I may, because I am a banker, I will also ask, what are the repayment of loans culture? And I think this was also mentioned by Lorna in her presentation. So all these are factors which go into influence financial institutions' delivery of financial services to that sector that we want to promote. Let me say that the current work that we are doing, which Suchitra from FAO is leading, the CAFI-SSF network, we have done our initial work in trying to look at how the financial institutions and insurance services are providing some kind of support to the SSF sector. And we have noted some interesting developments. We haven't concluded, but at least we have a draft, and there are some of the issues coming out which I may want to mention. One of the first findings we found was that most financial sector players, the microfinance and insurance, have limited range of specialized products and services that target the SSF sector, which means that they are deprived. The few that are available may not even suit them. So what must guide us when we want to come out with guidelines? There is need to consider some kind of motivation for these financial sector players so that they will want to explore and expand the range of products that they have so that access to their products will also be increased. Example, partnerships. If you have partnership that will give them technical assistance, some kind of support, it's a motivation to expand their products. We also saw another thing, that there was evidence of growing interest from financial service providers to diversify their portfolios into fisheries sector. In fact, we interviewed some financial sector operators who are not even lending to fisheries, but then you can see the desire that they have if there are good opportunities there. So here too, we must be guided that in doing our programs, we must invite some of these financial institutions, despite the fact that they are not lending to the sector. We must invite them, let them know what we are doing, disseminate information that will give them awareness of what is happening in the fisheries sector. And then the risk perception of these financial institutions are very high for that sector. And this also was hammered in by Lorna. And if the risks are high, we should be guided to come out with programs that will mitigate the risks that financial institutions face. They are lending monies which are not their monies. They will only do so when the risks are down. So we should consider some of the emerging lending approaches, like the risk-sharing approaches that combine guarantee schemes, insurance schemes, technical assistance to lower down the cost of their operations so that they can lend to those sectors. We also came across the issue of limited awareness of the need for insurance by fisher folks. Fisher folks find it difficult to part money when already they don't have for insurance. So how can we come across this? We need to consider creating that awareness that if you have insurance, you mitigate your risks. And then also there was this issue of development partners that we saw on the field. And perhaps FAO should also take note. We realized from our engagement, apart from the questionnaire, we have also done some focus group discussions. Engagement with some of these are showing that most of these development partners have been the most active sector through various programs and projects. But what we find is that most of them, however, fall short of mobilizing private funding for scaling up project outcomes. So yes, they are doing something down there. But what these institutions really need is mobilization of resources, which they don't have. So if you give them capacity building, you enhance their understanding, you create this awareness, and they don't have that access to mobilize funds. It still cripples them, and they are not able to do much for the sector. So we should consider building potential partnerships with these institutions so that we can help them to put them in a position. If you provide technical assistance, it will put them in a position to make them attractive so that they can even attract, say, challenge funds that are hovering around. They can even attract concessional funding. So the work that FAO is leading should position these small credit institutions to be able to attract blended financing around. There is one issue that came up which even connects some central banks. Unexpected interest from financial stakeholders such as regulators. In our work, we found 2 central banks that were very keen in the CAFI-SSF network. And they are even telling us that when we finish, we should give them the report for them to study to see whether there are opportunities in the fisheries sector. Like it has been said, and Dr. Prasun even said it, the central banks have indicators from the financial institutions. Many don't even specifically show fisheries sector. They lump them in agriculture. This finished. But this is an opportunity where we have seen that once we have some of these regulators in our network, why don't we use them to come out with policies that can bring out some of these indicators specifically, so that financial institutions will provide them, so that when you look at fisheries, you can see so and so amount of resources went into fishery. So here we want to sound that in coming out with guidelines, we must initiate policies that will influence support for the sector at the financial institutions level. And here it is important because I want us to link all these guidelines eventually to policy. So if it is policy, what Africa is doing currently is that we are looking at policy at financial institutions level. They themselves can. We are looking at policies at the regulators level, that is the central banks. And we are also looking at policy at the level of governments. If FAO can follow this trend, we can have a systematic flow of policy that may be up to the central banks and to even government. Maybe trying to finish, I want to say that we need to create awareness about what can be done to the fisher folk and to even the financial institutions. Sometimes we think that they know a lot. They don't know a lot. We must create awareness, especially for these small institutions. We must identify capacity building needs and areas through proper targeting. I am saying this because in our interaction with one of our members, Ssfs in Zambia, they are working with World Fish Center, which has an office in Zambia. This World Fish Center is a research institution that promotes innovation and then scale up these innovations in fisheries and agriculture. And in their findings, they have realized that even though they have provided a lot of capacity building to some financial institutions and to the fisher folk, these have not increased the access of the fisher folk to credit. So what is wrong with the capacity building that was provided? And so as we look at the guidelines, we have to do proper targeting. What kind of capacity do the fisher folk need? What kind of capacity do the small financial institutions need? These are critical because if we target them well, then we will succeed. And there is one interesting thing that came out in Zambia, that when we are providing capacity, we should not only look at the financial side, the credit, but holistically. It came out that there was what they have termed fish for sex. Sometimes fish is scarce. Those women who go and then buy from these fisher folk, they have to trade sex before they can get fish. So in trying to build capacity, we have to look at this side because certain aspects of the fishery work is also promoting social vices. So in a nutshell, the guidance for this work that we are doing must take a holistic look at the entire fishery sector and not just the financing side. I know my time is up, but as I end, I will say that we should also factor in strong management, because strong management is what builds confidence in any investor who wants to invest in such area. And we must also build in environmental component in financial services delivery. In doing so, we will minimize the degradation that is going on in our oceans, in our lakes, in our rivers, to preserve our fishery sector. I'll put a note here because of time. If there are any questions, we are ready also to respond. Thank you very much for giving me the time. But before I say full stop, let me also say that Africa, we have also started promoting the CAFI network amongst our members. Already, East Africa, we have contacted them, West African Anglophone, West African Francophone, and we are also promoting them in the programs that we have. So we believe that going forward, we can get more members to patronize this work that has been started by FAO. Thank you very much. We pledge that we will continue to support this program, and we are looking out for strategies even to expand this in our network. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Essel, for bringing out the nuanced points related with Africa region to be considered for capacity building. And we realize that it's not just that about the financial services, but we need to look at to have a holistic approach before to kind of facilitate and implement the financial services in this region. So thank you so much for that. And I would also like to mention over here about Africa is Africa has been supportive to the CAFI-SSF network. Even before we had finalized our network's governance and strategy paper last year, while we were just having interactive meetings with stakeholders. So Africa had asked us to address and talk about the network both to the Francophone and the Anglophone regions. So thank you so much in having the confidence and helping us to build the network in Africa region. So if there are any other questions for Dr. Raymon or for Dr. Thomas or for Dr. Prasun, we have another 3 more minutes.
Hi, Suchitra. Sachin this side from Samavit. Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
So this question is for Lorna and Raymon. I mean, either of you can answer this. My question is that how FAO is helping the financial service providers, be it bank or microfinance companies, in designing the right financial products for small scale farmers. Because we have seen that these MFIs or the banks which are near to the rural market and catering to the rural economy, I mean rural demand for financial services, they really don't have right kind of financial products for the fishery sector. And this there's a huge gap. I mean, even if there may be good case studies around across the world, but if we really want to see the examples which have been really scaled up at a larger scale, I mean, have been really scaled up. To my knowledge, I really don't find many such examples. So how FAO or the other policymakers are influencing this space where the right kind of financial products can be designed.
Yes,
and have you and one more supplementary question: is there any publication on all the good case studies or good examples where the financial institutions have designed the right set of financial products and have been really successful? So such publication will also be helpful. Thank you. My question is over. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, shall I respond quickly to the question of Mr. Sachin? Yeah, from FAO, most of the work that we have been doing in the agricultural field in terms of supporting the design of financial products and for instance, things like loan analyzer tools and so are available in the Rural Finance Learning Center website. And so there they are most accessible. And in case you are missing something on a certain subject, because there is a search engine and so, but if you miss anything, then just let me know. And I will try to locate this among the colleagues that we have in the financial service unit or team, ESP it's called in FAO. So I'll be happy to to find that these publications or any information for you. In that Rural Finance Learning Center information on the website, you won't see a lot about fisheries or aquaculture as yet, because that is an area what is largely not covered so far. And for that reason, it is important we have this CAFI network where we are developing these new tools and the design the new programs together with the financial service providers and the sector. So I hope this answered your question. If there are certain specific items or subjects you are searching for and you cannot find on the website, please contact me or Suchitra, of course. Thank you.
Sure, Raymon. Thanks a lot. Just one quick response to that. I mean, you know that in India, and I represent India, so we have more than 250 microfinance companies, including banks which have entered microfinance sector. I mean, to my limited knowledge, none of the microfinance companies have a financial product for the small scale fishery space. I mean, they already have presence in those area where the small fishermen live, right? So the physical access is there, but I'm really wondering why such financial products have not been designed. So, I mean, this requires certain, I mean, further research and investigation for sure. But that really keeps me puzzled. I mean, why this is so?
Just to add what Raymon said for Sachin, that we are now implementing 2 projects, one in the Philippines and one in Thailand. So there we are actually working on the questions you asked, that what should be the procedure, what should be the forms. Actually, none of the banks do have a specific product for fisheries, not only in India, nowhere in this region. So what we are trying here to understand what are the issues and challenges. When we have understood that, then we come out with a kind of a national level platform where they will come with their problems and what we are going to provide them with a support solution. Okay. Now, on that aspect, what we are doing with the financial institutions in the Philippines, that we are developing the forms, procedures, and the instruments or the financial products. So, which will be then piloted and the capacity building will be done across. So now we are at almost at the second stage of this, that forms and procedures have already been developed. Now the Credit Council, Policy Council of Philippines, they are disseminating it with the financial institution, including the microfinance institutions, because that is one of the challenges actually already documented by Lorna, that we really do not have a specific forms or specific products or services available. So that might give us some kind of idea when we will disseminate it and share it with other countries, that they will follow those forms and procedures and contextualize according to their system and requirement. I think it will take another 2 to 3 months, which within that period we will be able to provide some more document. As Raymon was telling, it's not available much on the RFL site, but we will definitely be doing it. Thank you.
Okay. So
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
okay, if there are no other questions, if there are no sorry,
Suchitra, can I say
Yes.
something?
Yes, Mr. Vivekanand.
Lorna had mentioned in one of her slides about the financing through groups. Now, I think it's an important area for the network to look at, because at least in India, I'm not aware of any successful initiative that has actually been done on individual basis with small-scale fishermen or fishers. fisherwomen included. They're not, so it will be interesting to know whether I am right on this anyway, and whether the individual treating the fishers as individuals and a financial institution dealing directly with them, does it work at all? And to what extent the groups are successful. And many of us swear by the group model, and largely we believe that the community organizations are best placed to ensure proper delivery and repayment. Unless the fishermen themselves police themselves, very difficult for outsiders to go and enter their system and try to get success. So this is one, let's say, experience, or even you can treat it as an hypothesis. If that, this is very crucial because the institution building for microfinance among the communities, if that is important, then that is an area where there's not much documentation or research in the fisheries side, in terms of fisheries for small scale fishers. And there is a huge cost and effort required in that. And there is not much attention to that. So you have the supply side in many countries where there are interested, at least prima facie interest in funding, lending, but the demand side is not well organized to receive that. And that area, the investments and the various issues related to organizing the communities are somewhat vague at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your inputs, Mr. Vivekanand.
Maybe, sorry to intervene again, just one example of the kind of problems when we are dealing with small scale fishers individual. Joseph from the South Indian Federation of Fishermen Societies is also here. I worked with him for many years. And our local village cooperatives with small scale fishermen for both marketing and credit. We looked at our records and looked at the income variations between individual fishermen doing the same kind of occupation, similar boat, similar net, everything similar, ceteris paribus. We found that if you drop the outliers, including those who fell sick in a year and couldn't go fishing, the variation in annual income for people doing the same type of fishing with similar equipment, similar investment was as high as 5:1. So the capture fishery variation in income fisherman to fisherman is so high. This is not going to happen in any agroclimatic zone. If you compare small farmers in a particular agroclimatic zone, you will not find this kind of variation. So this requires specialized institutions mediating between the fisher and the financial. And that is where I want to stress once again this. Sorry for taking more time.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. Thank you very much. I know there must be a lot many questions and you'll have, but we have the time constraint too. And we've already exceeded beyond the time, but it was hard for me as a coordinator to stop because there were so many insightful suggestions and comments that were coming through. So sorry about that. I could not stop, but it was really good to have those insights. So finally, I would like to thank all the participants for joining us and providing us these suggestions to build the institutional financing for the SSF, the challenges faced, and the policy initiatives that need to be taken forward and discussed, perhaps country-specific wise going forward to ensure that institutional financing and financial instruments can be implemented for the SSF sector. So thank you so much to everyone. And I would also like to mention that everyone has been immensely patient in listening to this webinar for the last 2 hours. Generally, we find a lot of people drop out, but there has been a consistent presence. So I'm sure it has been of interest, and we will continue organizing these kinds of webinars. We're also open to suggestions from the participants. If you all would like to suggest any particular topics, we'll be happy to organize on those topics and bring in experts to discuss them. So thank you so much. And yes, with this, we close this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Have a great evening, a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Okay, for a long time. Good.